you're basing this budget with the escrow $400,000. So let's say we have 6,000. What about money from that fare box that for the additional passengers over 2,100? She said, well, part of that can be applied against, what you have to put in there. So I went back to the rail division. I said, scribble some numbers down. And a day later, I got back and figured we probably, their estimate is, and they cut it in half, their projection number just with the dollar figure. They said, probably going to be 250,000, 200 actions, 253,000, if you want to know what it was. So that can, the more riders, the less money the number in terms of subsidy. But there's a second part of your question. It's okay, this is a 2-year non-recurring funding I'm getting out of Western North Carolina Railroad is getting out of the legislature. They, in talking with John Torpin, who's the chair of the committee, he said, Ray, we've got to make sure that the communities are on board on this thing. And when you all know this, when you get down to, do you really want it? Well, then it's going to cost you. And if you really want it, then they'll have to provide some money for it. Well, after 2 years, we can look at what the ridership numbers are. We can determine, I think it's fair to say, if they fund us for 2 years, they will give us partial funding to continue the service. But they're going to demand at that point, they being the legislature, that we pony up as the community served along this line. I can tell you that Marion is ready to do that right now because the vice chair of our committee is the mayor, Steve Little of Marion. And he's already talked to his board about that. It's going to have to come before your city council. And of course, Julie Mayfield was the one that introduced the support resolution for this that the city passed. Those resolutions next Monday are being given to each member of the House, Senate, and Transportation Appropriations Committee from all of the communities along that route. Their councils and county commissions have passed resolutions to do this, so they know there's local support for this. And but the real rub will come in 2 years. Are you really behind it? Well, it's it's going to be a pay to play here. If you want to keep the service. So maybe complex answer.
That's great. That's great, and I really appreciate all the effort and time you have put into this process thus far. I've seen you give this talk before, and I'm impressed that it's coming full circle. It might have some momentum now. I appreciate that. I'm curious what members of this commission or members of the public can do to help support this, other than get on the bus when it shows up.
Well, and I really would like you to do it. I can tell you that your local delegation has been super supportive. And that's Terry Van Dyne, Brian Turner, Susan Fisher. They have been nothing but supportive. I think it would help us I want you to do it in a way that many of you run into these folks on a regular basis, or you're at a cocktail party or some other event. Just say, I hear things are going well with these appropriations, and let them know your support for it. I think it is absolutely critical that they keep getting that enforcement, because we may overcome a major hurdle, folks. The first hurdle was getting Amtrak to talk to us. They weren't interested. Now they're interested in ridership, in building their ridership, and more so. And Asheville is still that desired destination. And they hear enough about Asheville, they want to make that connection. You mentioned Cherokee. The previous head of the rail division had been talking to Cherokee about running a dedicated train from Asheville to Car on the back of the train to Salisbury. And the idea was to have Harris have a shrink-wrap bus there in Salisbury to take them directly to the casino. So the status of that I haven't followed up on recently, but Paul Worley was the person who was involved in those. He was the director of the rail division involved in those negotiations. think it's happening. You know, there's just a lot of things percolating right now, and any positive comments that you can provide to our representatives and senators will be wonderfully helpful.
Like talking people's ears off about policy issues at cocktail parties is one of my hobbies.
Well, we're in your wheelhouse. Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for being here today.
To present to you
And keep us posted. Yeah.
The last thing I'll say, because I was hoping somebody was going to ask the question, so if the appropriation will go by July 1, of course, because that's the new budget year. If it makes it through the entire House process, through the Senate process, it will be 270 days to implement it.
Oh, wow.
And the Rail Division has all the steps outlined in there, so it's, I'm kind of excited, but I'm going to knock on wood before.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Maybe it's too early to ask.
Sure.
Sorry, but thank you for all your work. This is really, really exciting for our community. Do you have any idea how often the buses are going to run?
The initial service will be one bus, each way. And the Rail Division is working out the best connection times for this. The primary focus initially will be intrastate, because as you know, we have 8 trains, 4 leaving Raleigh to Charlotte every day, and 4 leaving Charlotte to Raleigh every day, run by there. And you also have the 7:30 train that comes into Salisbury, the Carolinian, which that's the one that continues on to Washington, New York. And late at night, you've got the Crescent, the old Southern Crescent. That is a late night train that goes south to Charlotte, Atlanta, New Orleans, and north to Washington, New York. And so you can make connections there. If you were going to Florida, as an example, since we have so many folks coming from Florida, the connection for you would be to Raleigh, and you'd catch a north-south train going to Florida from there. So it's I can't tell you it's going to be the most convenient schedule, and I don't know if you can look at the timetables and see. If you're going intrastate, you've got lots of connections, easy connections, and the reason they have 4 trains a day going in each direction from Raleigh and Charlotte, people are tired of driving that I-40-85 corridor, and they can get from downtown to downtown now in a little over 3 hours. It's 3 hours and 9 minutes, and the trains are running at 79 miles an hour, and there are people that are, one of my physicians here in town talked to me about his brother-in-law who was using that to commute.
Yeah, it's great.
Commute, but it's
minute now.
people turning to alternatives to cars.
This is great. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you for letting me be here. Appreciate it.
Good luck. Okay, we are on to new business. About 15 minutes off schedule, but that's all right. We've got design review, 45 South French Broad. First we'll hear from staff, and then we'll hear from our development or design team.
Thank you. So here we have a design review for new construction. This is a level 2 project that's currently going through the city's development review process. The project site is a single parcel located at 45 South French Broad Avenue. You can see on the exhibit map, and everyone's very familiar with this location. The existing building is going to remain a 1-story existing building, and the applicant is proposing to construct a 3-story addition onto the building. The site on South French Broad Avenue, South French Broad, is a key pedestrian street. Parcel also has frontage from the rear on Am Street, which is not a key pedestrian street. This is outside of the traditional downtown site plan really remains, for all intents and purposes, when you're looking at it in this, from this view, pretty much the same. That three-story addition will go onto the top of the building, sort of in the rear of the building. This project came before, or an element of this project came before this commission back in 2017. Many of you were on the commission at that time, when they were, applicant was going through the process to get a variance in order to set the street wall at the one-story level. So this has been in contemplation for a while. So that three-story addition will be back somewhat to the rear of the existing building. There's residential and commercial uses proposed in that addition. The vehicular access is proposed to remain the same from Am Street, the rear, and they are proposing 2 levels of structured parking that would be under the building, and then formalizing the surface parking that's out there now. It's gravel now, so these plans propose improving that to a paved surface. The end result is about 91 parking spaces for the uses. And you'll recall that parking is not required downtown in the CBD. There's a number of anticipated variances and modifications that go along with this project. That's not abnormal because of the reuse of the existing building. There's just site constraints when you're keeping that existing building where it is with its footprint. So those are detailed in the staff report. Downtown Commission really doesn't weigh in on the variances in terms of the hardship that the applicant is going to be requesting, but if any of those variances seem in conflict with your design guidelines, that would certainly be appropriate to comment on. The project is going to alternative compliance of the Tree Commission on Monday for street trees, and that's the street trees that would be required along South French Broad Avenue. The existing sidewalk is proposed to remain. It doesn't meet the 10-foot wide standard. We've got the on-street parking that's desired to remain along South French Broad Avenue, so there's just not sufficient room to then meet the street tree standard. The applicant is proposing to place all of those 11 trees that would be required elsewhere on the site, so it's not a loss of tree canopy. They're just not going to be proposed to be along that streetscape. This element was discussed by the Design Review Committee, and there was general support for that. I mentioned the sidewalk width not being able to meet that 10-foot standard along South French Broad, so that would be a variance that'll go through with this review. Then the other variances that are noted in the staff report have to do with that reuse of the existing building. The downtown standards don't allow for loading from a key pedestrian street. There's an existing loading dock right there, so that would be proposed to remain. And the downtown standards don't allow for parking to be placed between a building and an abutting street. So that's proposed to remain in place in the rear. As far as the addition that's proposed on top of the building, that complies with the standards for the central business district that we have in place, design and operational standards, and with regard to activation, fenestration. They went through and detailed out in the staff report the ways that the proposal complies with the design guidelines. These others are quite numerous. There's a couple of areas that are in conflict with the design guidelines, and I marked those, and that really has to do with those reuse issues of the existing building with the parking and sidewalk. Staff recommends approval of the design for this application. As I mentioned, the project generally complies with the design guidelines and the design and operational standards for the central business district. And we noted all the practical challenges when you are incorporating an existing building into a new development. I mentioned that the project was reviewed with the Design Review Committee on February 19th, and they were supportive of the design. I don't know if you wanted to hear from that committee as well, but that goes.
I have a comment, and just in terms of what I recall that you mentioned in the Design Review Committee, obviously the parking was critical. You mentioned in front and the variance that are provided makes sense. I think that one thing that was not noted was that there was a discussion by the committee about happen, but that was an item discussed at length during the design review. Oh, is it?
I did see on the plans a suggestion that was made that, it was planters on the front of the, South French Broad with some green overhanging, you mentioned a plant. And that, I did see that
Yes.
on these revised plans.
Okay, I felt to see that. It's-
Great.
I have a quick question. I mean, it seems like some of the issues are parking, sort of activation of the streetscape, and also location of streets. It was losing a couple parking spaces and doing bump outs with trees considered here. Why was that off the table? Why would
It was considered, so when the plans first came in, there were 2 bump outs that were shown with a street tree in each. And at the technical review committee, the transportation department was recommending against doing that.
That was also where I saw the ADA spaces, right, in those between bump outs. That's what it's brought up.
That may have been, but that's been taken off of the consideration.
There are no,
Were
so
there-
if we're losing the handicap space, the bus stop, and the bump outs, and the trees.
Well, I don't think bus stops or handicap spaces are eliminated. That was not part of the discussion, but the bump outs is the only thing that was taken off the table at the TRC.
Were the transit committee's concerns, or transit department's concerns unassailable? Were they, what can you characterize them?
I can speak for them, but that was their recommendation, is that was, they would prefer to keep the on-street parking. That's a high use area, so that was their preference, was to not lose any on-street parking spaces. You know, we've had conflicting goals. We've got goals for on-street parking, we've got goals for street trees, and we've got goals for widened sidewalks. So if we are going to take all 3 of those, you know, it's difficult to decide what wins out, and we're trying to balance all of that.
Well, it looks like parking went out. Seems like there might be a little more give and take.
You're welcome to make a recommendation that you prefer to see bump outs.
C801, I don't know if you can flip to it, that has what I'm confused about now, because it's still showing the bump outs.
So that was an earlier plan.
Okay.
But this proposal does not, the current plan that's going to the alternative lines takes those out per recommendation of the transportation department.
So we could recommend they be back and add it in and with trees, but note that if it is in your design set, so if you scroll through those documents, it's on C801. So question about the loading, because it looks like they want to stay with the primary corridor loading. Is there a current problem with the loading? What is not compliant? Is it backing into a street? Is it doing anything that is dangerous?
So the standard is in the central business district to not permit loading from a key pedestrian street if there's an alternative available, to try to maintain the pedestrian flow, we're trying to eliminate as many curb cuts as possible along key pedestrian streets. So there is an alternative available in this location, which would be Ant Street, but there are practical challenges since this is loading that's in place to act, for the building that's on that ground
And
level.
particularly a grocery, which I know would be challenging for loading. It's a lot of loading.
Certainly.
So,
Its existence was not due.
right.
Right.
And it seems to me the alternative is that they have to load behind the building and have freight elevators to get up. I mean, that's a big difference.
Correct.
Just making sure I understand.
Yeah, there's quite a large elevation difference between Ann and South Ridge Broad.
Yeah. And when they go to the Planning and Zoning Commission that will be acting as a board of adjustment, as a part of that variance request, they'll be detailing all of those practical challenges that go with the site and are not really of the applicant's actions. And so a lot of that is building into that. We don't want to discourage adaptive reuse of existing buildings or preservation of existing buildings. That's certainly something that we are supportive of. And so that's going to be, but exactly like the grade change and what you have to do to reconfigure the internal working of the building, those all add into that justification request.
Yeah, I shop there fairly frequently, and it's really not a problem that I can see.
Yet. So the sidewalk, I remember from the initial review about the step back front wall, there was also talk about utilities on that sidewalk. What's the hindrance? Is it that the city sidewalk is 5 feet, so the developer would have to encourage their property the other 5 feet to be
So you've only got so much space from, because you've got that stone wall on the opposite side of the street with the United Way building. You've got the building face on this side. So there's only so much space in between there to accommodate everything that we're trying to accommodate. And, you know, going back to that, we have goals for street trees, we have goals for sidewalks for pedestrians, we have the need to keep traffic moving, and we know that we've got people who are coming and going and depend on street parking spaces. And we're trying, as a city, not to lose on-street parking as much as possible. So there's a lot of different goals with that.
And currently, I know we talked about this in the public space management, maybe in updates for this purpose, but so right now, am I hearing that the staff would prefer to keep the street spaces and the developer would prefer to keep the on-street spaces, not do the bump outs, not do the wider sidewalk, keep the parking? Is that what I'm hearing is kind
The
of?
applicant was fine with putting the trees in the bulb outs.
That's helpful. Okay. Okay. I'm looking at this list of potential variances, so no parking is allowed between the building and any abutting street, so variance to formalize the existing gravel parking. But why is that needed variance?
We don't allow that. That's the city said we don't want to see parking in between the building and the street. It's more of a suburban development pattern, and the city's anticipating seeing buildings up at the back of the street
So not for Ann Street.
for Ann Street.
Lots of variances for this whole building.
Do you know how disruptive the businesses there are going to be? We should get that question to the developer.
But yeah, I think they'll be better suited to answer that.
Any other questions for staff before we hear from the development team? I think that's it. We may have more.
Morning. My name is Charlie Dahl. I'm along with my family, we bought this building in 2014. I think most of you know South French Broad needed a little help at that time. We worked hard to activate and energize the neighborhood. The principal driver has obviously been the grocery store and grill movie house, Louis Thai, mixed use. But I just want to pitch Hatch ABL Foundation. We started in 2 years ago. That's really the why behind this project. We're completely out of space. We're all about creating tech jobs. We've got over 100 members, Hatch members in the building now. We've got a co-working center, 5 software companies. Our goal is to try to create well-paid high-tech jobs in Asheville. Our goal is to create 10 companies within 5 years with 10 million more sales in the tech community. So, an entire floor of the addition would be for Hatch. We today subsidize the rents for the tenants. We provide fully built-out spaces for free parking. That makes tech jobs easier to recruit to Asheville. We're not the easiest place to recruit. I came from Austin, where it's easy to recruit. People that come to town for a tech job wonder what happens if they lose their job, who else they can go to work for. So critical mass is what we're all about. We're using the residential to help subsidize the office space. So I always like to know why are you doing the project. That's really why we're doing the project. This is the 3rd largest rooftop in downtown after the Civic Center in Grove Arcade. It's an old government building. Fortunately, structurally, it was built to support additional floors above it. So we're doing what people rarely do, just trying to build on top of an existing building. But we've spent really the last year trying to formulate how to do it. And at this point, unless you have any questions, I'd like to have Krista or Todd present the project from a design standpoint. Questions? Thank you, guys.
Chris Davidson with Design Concepts. I'll keep it short. Jessica did a great job kind of summarizing everything. In fact, Andrew, we did have the bulb outs at technical review, transportation asked them to be removed. The other kind of icing on the cake as it related to removing those and relocating those trees elsewhere on the site was that the existing public water line is borders right at the edge of where those bulb outs would be, and the proximity of the water line to where those trees would go with the bulb out just kind of added to more reasons for those trees to be located elsewhere besides the loss of the existing parking on that As it relates to the green space, Stephen Lee, Robert mentioned some of that was incorporated in that work. I'll tell you a little bit more about the buildings that are available for site questions as the conversation continues.
Thank you.
Good morning, Robert Todd with Red House Architecture. I'd like to introduce the rest of my team, Melanie Page, Kayla Adams. Just do a brief description of what we've got. So we've got an existing building that was not very pretty. It was a little bit underbred through most of its life. And Charlie was able to purchase it. We started adding windows and fenestration along the South French Broad and along the north and along the back. So it's been a slow evolution towards making it better. And I think ultimately, to your question, Andrew, or concern is we've had discussions long-term that we want to improve that streetscape. And so as more structured parking or less vehicular use occurs downtown, then we want to be able to, let's say in another phase, push out that sidewalk, generate street trees there. The way that we presented this project it is not a phased project, although there are discussions, as Charlie mentioned, it is a large rooftop, and at some point in the future, we could imagine that there could be other development happening in that rooftop. The building is structured to have additional stories, however, those stories need to be made of materials as light as possible. And so we are proposing basically a composite metal exterior. We've got a material board. It's appropriate to show that at this time. We can pass that around. The elevations essentially show, and as described by Jessica's report, it's a metal-clad building with large amounts of, we have additional amounts of glazing as opposed to the minimums required in the upper stories. That's a little bit of a compensation for not meeting the standard on the first level because it is existing. We are improving that non-conformity down the first floor with glazing. But we're contemplating a series of perforated screens that will provide some degree of solar shading as well as some degree of privacy for the balconies there. And as Charlie mentioned, it is one floor of hatch and it is 2 floors of residential. If there's any questions? Well, let me hit that with Stephen Lee, is that we did have those planners. That was, I'll say Carolina Justin, but I think is that correct?
Yeah, and just this, I've got one comment that relates to that. Thank y'all for beginning to incorporate that in there. I think in terms of relating that with the streetscape and the original street tree bulb outs, the 2 that were proposed, given the site constraints right there with these massive utility lines and the type of tree that would be required, which is a small, I think what was on the original plan, a redbud, it seems like a forced item to me. If the effort went towards executing what y'all are proposing now, and if it works well, the difference could be really dramatic, and we can have kind of a street tree effect, but it's integrated into the building. We're not forcing which would in essence be a multi-island with one skinny tree in it, and it gets run over by people going to the grocery store all the time. And I think it's a great change and a shift in thought that I think could be really interesting. I just went back on Google Street View 10 years ago and look at the transformation that's occurred on that building, and it's dramatic, and it shows that the owner and design can have the capability of kind of executing these kind of cool graphic effects. And I think with these planters are showing, we could get a really enhanced streetscape without those 2 street trees.
I have an overall site plan kind of comment. I'm looking at the aerial view of this building, satellite view, and I'm wowed by how many surface lots surround you. I mean, you are essentially surrounded by parking that is not your parking. But I'm curious if, so the plan is to build out the structured parking underneath the building, that kind of cantilever roof, right? And then to give a surface
You nailed it. And you're exactly right. Is that when you look, Charlie's a dreamer and a critical thinker. Is that a fair compliment? And so he understands, and he can take the aerial approach, let's say. And so we see a lot of underutilized spaces there. We had designed the new intermediate level of parking underneath the building to be flat, to be minimum 9-foot ceiling clearance, in the thought that at one point in the future we'll have less cars. Maybe we're sharing rides, or maybe we've got great public transportation. So we can convert that new intermediate level of parking into additional residential or office spaces. So we can program it for humans as opposed to vehicles. So depending on which way our future leads us, right, is that we've got plans for a structured deck back on the end that would also be activated as downtown grows and infills into our existing infrastructure that we have. Then and could be more activated. You could potentially see storefronts down and structured parking in the back. The Texas Donut, is that what we call? Parking garages that are surrounded by activated facades. So, and then also to the north, there's property that what used to be the old bread building that painted bright red now. That's a large property, and there's been some thought of, in the future, we don't know if it's 10 or 20 or 30 but years away, but it's like, how could all of that come together and then begin to share some potential structured parking? The city has a good track record of doing a public-private arrangement in order to generate public parking, as opposed to having to come out of the coffers of the city, which there is no money available for that. But certainly this site in the future could be identified as one of those. So the answer is absolutely. We see this as again a continual evolution of just making this site better. Full disclosure, I'm a neighbor, building owner next door. Our office is there, and so we were pioneers to that part of the town. We bought a building that had been boarded up for 20 years, renovated it ourselves, and became a component of the South Asheville residents.
You're on the Hilliard side of them?
Uh,
Do you have any problems with the loading there?
We did, and we worked through it, and so the primary delivery there is Hoppy that comes in on an 18-wheeler, and so we have our entrance to our driveway and parking in the front, and then our neighbor, which is Buncombe County Health Department. So we were able to work with Hoppy, and so they're able to position the truck so that it doesn't block our driveway, and it blocks one of the neighbor's driveway, but they also have 2 additional driveways there. So all is well and good when we work through it.
I have a question with the residential units. Are they intended to be for sale, long-term or short-term?
They're intended to be for sale and not for short-term leasing.
I think this is pretty cool. We've seen that long-term, like residential sale units are subsidizing another goal here with that type of office space, and that is really neat. When you see plans that say there's only one way to do things, only one type of use that could possibly subsidize a building, I think that's materially untrue, and we can tell that with a project like this. So very, very interesting. I applaud that.
And it's
very, it's very canyon-like between those two things. And also, I understand there's like always competing goals, but, you know, I consistently see that parking wins to the detriment of all the other goals. And there's got to be a little more give and take on accomplishing all of our goals. You know, there's, for the large amounts of people who are going to be solely walking to that grocery station, parking doesn't really do a lot for them. So I feel like that we have to do something for our pedestrian neighbors there, whether it's large planters or something above ground. So that's where I'm at with that. Maybe that can help shape the motion if there's critical mass to go with that.
Any other comments, concerns about, so I'm hearing and reading alternative streetscape plan.
Robert, could you spend like a minute just talking about the materials and how those slide panels work and guardrails and just what the, is that big stairs, that exterior space?
Sure. I don't have a pointer. Is there a pointer? Okay. I guess it's the idea that someone can move that panel from the balcony, or do they have to all move together for some text or something?
Yes.
A leading question to talk about that. Thank you, Greg. So what we've envisioned is, again, we're trying to improve this building and trying to improve this site. You can see this building from a number of vantage points, not just South Orange Broad. And so we like the idea of activating the facade that can be controlled by the owner/tenant. And so on the west side, we have recessed balconies, almost porches as you're looking out to the mountains, and we envision having some of the perforated metal as a screen. Some would be fixed and some would be sliding, and so that an owner, an occupant could slide that screen, and as the sun starts to break around from the south to the west, provide some screening, it could provide some privacy as well. And we would do the same thing on the front, and so you'll see in the elevations, we've got notes related to perforated screen, and some are fixed and some are moving. And so the idea is that the building is living. As you pass by one day, it may look different the next day because of the way that the screens are positioned. So only in the initial architect's rendering will everything line up, and then we'll see that when people are home, or we'll see how people use their space. And so that was one of the components that we wanted to showcase, as well as at night. You mentioned the canyon effect. If you Google Street View doesn't have a night shot, but I can tell you 10 years ago, you held onto your wallet and you walked really quickly through that area, and you weren't sure if you were going to make it to your car. It was just dark, and you just weren't sure how safe you were. But now at night, you've punctuated it with the windows, you've got light spilling out, you've got folks going to the movies. And so the idea is that at night we can read the building differently again, because we've got perforated, the stairwell that Brent was talking about in the upper elevation is on the left, that's the south elevation. So that's seen as a glass stairwell, and so you're seeing this glowing light coming out from there, as well as back to the screens. Whether the screen is closed or open, you're seeing light spill out there. So we wanted to activate the building at night as well.
What is the street light presence there? Are there building lights or street lights?
They're both. They're both.
And it's become pretty lit up at this point?
It is. And so there's a series on the building, there's a series of downlight LED, fairly bright, casting out light down on the sidewalk. And then there's also just standard Duke Energy LED street lights.
And that rooftop with the big step back, is it going to be operational? Are people going to be able to be on that roof?
We have a portion of it that is. And so what we were doing is activating above low tide. We're not saying low tide would build a stairwell and go up there and have a roof deck, because they've got a patio down below. But anything is possible. But we did see that there would be the potential for residents or hatch staff to come out of that spot.
That helps with activation.
Yes.
Okay. I have one thing I'd are surrounded by this much parking. That's my only
We
point.
have water issues, water line issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I went back into the TRC staff report just to double check what they had said, and part of it is to maintain flexibility for a future, comprehensive streetscape redesign, and that ties into what Robert mentioned as well, is that, and then into these competing goals, is that the city is looking at better ways to try to meet all of these competing goals. If we put in 2 bulb outs right now for street trees and try to figure out how that would work for now, that's really a short-term complicated solution. So that was their preference.
It's how we tend to do things, project by project, but yeah. So I just wanted to share that image so that y'all can see how much parking. Okay, so we've got, I've heard some pushback on the greening of the corridor. I don't hear too many concerns about the loading. Does anybody feel like they can make a motion? Andrew, maybe because you have the street tree concern?
All right.
There's a suggestion motion on the back page, and then you can include your criteria.
All right, I think I know what to do. All right, I move to recommend approval of the design for 45 South French Broad Avenue as presented based on the site plans, elevations, and materials submitted and discussion heard during this review, including the following conditions: that alternative compliance for street trees be made to have a number of street trees present on the pedestrian corridor.
Recommended that.
Yeah, still recommend.
Right, we're just recommending, yeah, you don't need our approval to move forward, we're just recommending. Okay, were there any other recommendations that anyone wanted to add? Or can I get a second, let's call the process.
Second.
Okay, discussion, any other amendments or criteria you wish to have as part of the motion? We're recommending approval with some recommendation that street trees somehow get in the mix. All right, all in favor? Oh, Eric, go ahead.
I wanted to ask if there was any consideration made to having a bulb out there at Little B, where though you couldn't put a tree in, you could have on-street dining and access to potted plants. Seems like one way to get in. And to lose a space or two there, though they're in demand at the moment, it's largely because the parking from Ann Street is way underutilized. When this project is completed, that won't be the case. Those 2 spaces in front of the building not being nearly as in demand as they are.
Well, they can do that already. I mean, that's part of the city process, just like.
They can do what they don't.
Well, they don't.
Now they're chance to mention it.
I guess there's one thing I failed to mention too, is a crosswalk here. There's no safe way across the street. And that may be out of the scope of our review right now, but.
Something great for the design guideline update.
Yes, I mean,
Public space management.
yes. Anyway, just thinking about that, like,
Yeah.
to be able to cross the street legally to go to.
And basically what we're seeing is that y'all are doing something awesome, and it means that there's gonna be more people in this area. And how do we accommodate more people when you're already struggling with utilities, narrow sidewalks, congested parking? How do we look beyond this one project and in 10 years, make sure it's moving safely? And it'd be great if we had a corridor study and it brought in street trees and stuff, but those things seem like really far down the line. So here you are in front of us, and I think we're recommending that you find a way to do some greening. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
You opposed?
I oppose the suggested motion.
Okay, do you wanna,
Make a new motion, or?
Well, I don't think it really makes a difference, but my opinion, I think I've voiced early on, I think that, in understanding what the potential is for the impact of the street trees, even the existing conditions, owner resources devoted towards what they're proposing now is gonna have a much stronger impact, and that's just my personal professional opinion.
as a landscape architect, okay, which you're right, there could be horribly maintained tiny trees. Thank you. So we do sorry for the confusion.
Okay, may I have the opportunity to clarify that? And so the.
Can you come to the mic?
Oops, sorry. Okay, over here a second. With that, Celine, I understand the reasons that you're saying that, and so that will be clarified as an approval minus Stephen Lee as one no, but primarily related to the
Yeah,
amended.
it'd be clear.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
My hope there is that, Steve, that both of our concerns are addressed.
Okay.
Yeah, fine.
And we're good on this, it's closed.
For the record, under Robert's rules, somebody voted yes, and the motion can, put forth a motion to reconsider.
I thought, but,
It just can't be the person
Yeah.
voting. It can't be the development.
okay, come together, guys.
I would like
This-
to put a motion for, to revote on the motion. However I need to say it.
Motion to reconsider.
Motion to reconsider.
So then that will open up debate again, and it can then be amended through Robert's rules. Somebody can offer a friendly amendment or come up with a motion.
And it
A
needs
friendly
a
amendment will have to
second.
be
So
approved.
we've got a motion on the table to reconsider the vote. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion about this? So we're about to vote
No,
again.
yeah, I wanted to put on the record that I voted yes because I want to approve the building, but I also agree with the opinion expressed down there.
So here, I agree.
There's three of us now, so.
I agree.
Okay,
There's
Robert's
four.
rules, help me down here, Toby. So we now need, so we need a motion, a new motion, that is to approve the project without the recommendation of street trees. And you can make that motion.
Or the original maker of the motion can accept an amendment, which may or may not be what he wants to do, but that's the easier route.
What's the amendment?
To remove the recommendation of the greening trees, your original motion.
Well,
You don't have to.
That's your.
well, I came here for something.
Okay, so what I'm hearing now is someone at the dais can make a motion to approve this project as is without any further recommendations. So if you have a motion you would like to make, this is the time.
So I'll make a motion. I move to recommend approval of the design for 45 South French Broad Avenue as presented based on site plans, elevations, and materials submitted in discussion heard during this review.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Now it's back on the table for discussion of the new motion.
Right, so this is a new motion, this is a recommendation, this is approval without any additional recommendations.
So, y'all really don't care about seeing planners there? As a
It's
placeholder
just too,
until we get
it's
better
too
street
limited in
plans?
space, you know. If you look at that sidewalk, it's only 5 feet wide, you know, it's already too congested. I mean, adding street trees isn't gonna
On
help.
the plan that's submitted is shown 2 street trees that could not be planted, but could be planters. There seems to be a lot more, I think, I guess I'm looking at it much more.
The planters on the building is fine. It's just, you don't want to make the sidewalk any more congested than it already is. I mean, it's just too crowded already.
On the screen is what Andrew is talking about.
Yeah.
See, this is the
We're
side.
plans that we're looking at
We're sure, we've got two
online and
sets.
the tree.
Sure. Yeah, and because that changed after the consideration by the TRC. At the design review committee, there was a lot of discussion about this, and there was discussion about putting planters on the sidewalk, and everyone determined that there would not be the ability to maintain an ADA clearance around those planters because of that narrow sidewalk width. And then the discussion turned to doing some kind of a growing vine that had a little, I'm not gonna say this term right, but like a little planting box at the bottom, so that the plants could grow up from the bottom. And again, that's encroaching into that narrow sidewalk, so there wasn't sufficient space for that. And the ultimate kind of topic was to put the planters, or to put vines at the top to cascade, and then provide that greening of the facade without encroaching into the existing sidewalk.
So we're talking about 5-foot sidewalks. Planters would go outside at 5 foot possibly, and if they were going to be like bulb outs for those planters. So we're not talking about infringing on ADA accessibility. We're not talking about getting into the earth to interfere with the lines. We're talking about losing parking here. And to me, that is the
does the survey show where the water line is now? Is it underneath asphalt or concrete?
It is directly underneath the paint, it looks like, of the parking lots.
Do you see the,
The driver's side.
so you've got water, it's actually running on, you can see the proposed bulb outs here, I wish I could
Mhm.
point there.
Yeah.
And you can see the water line on the edge.
If I could just add a little, I don't mean to step on anyone's toes, but just to be clear, transportation has said no. The reason they said no is that they want for long-term to be able to plan this street. We've run into this problem on Cox Avenue when we were doing the tactical urbanism, where we had bulb outs in front of 150 Cox, and if you could hear, what's his name from Miami, famously from him talking about, why did you do this? Why did you let me be here? This is horrible. I mean, you start to understand that there are, I mean, you can eventually rip them off, I guess.
Right.
But it's just, it makes it harder for the long-term planning of the district. So
Bulb
transportation
outs
has
are
said, transportation has
not
said no.
popular at all. You had one on Lexington, and it was not popular. We tried it as an experiment, and the businesses hated it.
I love it.
Well, maybe you loved it, nobody else did.
And I know we're always thinking long-term and big picture, we're trying to here, and streetscape projects move slowly here in Asheville just because of cost. But what I think about when I think of this parcel is the fact that we have over the last year and a half reviewed and approved literally hundreds of new walkable residential units that will utilize this commercial space. And just think about what's happening in that block alone. And there are now residents at Patton Avenue. And this is a whole, it's a super transformation that's occurring really fast. If the MHA project moves forward, Patton Avenue apartments are online. If park maintenance project moves forward, I mean, we're talking about just this absolute deluge of new residential occupants that are going to be pedestrians on this street. And I'm convinced that the overall streetscape alteration here is inevitable, and I think it's sooner rather than later. And I think that this is what's like after Cox and Ashland. I think the focus is going to be moving in this direction because all the people are walking.
In order to set precedents, could we say that we would like some sort of greening effort to be made and leave that up to the building developer?
If that's what moves us forward without bowing down to the parking gods, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle because I know that corridor, and I wish for it to have more activation and greening.
I request a 3-minute break.
3-minute break right now.
Yes.
We're in the middle of a motion, okay. Got a request for a 3-minute break.
This is empty.
Do you think we can finish this particular discussion before break?
Sure.
Okay, thank you for hanging in there. I've got some hot beverage if you need.
That's not.
That's not
stronger.
Okay, so let's recap and try to shut this down. Okay, so we've got a new motion on the table to approve this without any other recommendations. We've got a second, we've had plenty of discussion. Is there any further discussion at this moment? Okay, then let's vote, okay? All in favor?
Can we go right back to this before?
Can
Is it
read
just-
back, yes,
is it
so it
just
is literally the recommendation that you see on the last page to approve the design of 45 South French Broad Avenue as presented based on site plans, elevations, and materials submitted and discussion heard during this review, including no additional conditions.
It does have the lines from the top for agreement.
But that, we're not having that as a condition.
No, that's on the plans.
Yeah.
I just want to get that.
Okay, and we have a first and we have a second, we've had discussion, so now we're gonna vote. All in favor, we're gonna need your hands. Okay, so we're through, you're good. Any opposed? I need to get your official no's. I'm gonna say no for process reasons. Okay, we're good. Good luck, guys. Don't worry about the street trees, but if